Hey, it's Mark Pattison back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week, we've got another epic guest, and he really fits in the whole classification of a guy that has overcome a lot of adversity and found his way in life. And his name is Justin Osmond. And Justin is from a very famous family, the Osmonds. And so we all remember growing up, the Osmonds, Donnie and Marie singing away, and all the brothers in the background, the family Christmas specials, in the homes, and they'd sing these great Christmas carols. It was really awesome and very family friendly. And then here comes Justin Long, son of Merrill, and he's born with a severe hearing loss. And what that must have been like, the son of a famous father who still sings today, and he can't hear or understand what he was saying. So they finally figured this thing out about 3 years old. And then at that point, there was this whole learning component that he had to overcome. And what that was like, kind of doubling up to catch up. In a lot of cases, he was bullied in high school and when he was a youth. But he persevered, he went on and he can play a whole bunch of instruments, the violin, the viola, the piano, the drums, and then he played sports, went on to become a Scout Eagle. And then later in life, he formed a foundation in honor and in memory of his super great grandma, Olive, who was really the matriarch of the whole Osmond family. And he tells always these cool stories about how the whole Osmond singing tree began. And it really began from his two older, or actually the Osmond's oldest brothers, who were deaf themselves. And so the younger Osmonds, Merrill, Jimmy, and Jay, and the others, went out and they formed a barbershop quartet. And then they would sing in fairs, and then they raised enough money to be able to buy these hearing aids for the brothers so they could actually hear. So, this thing was hereditary. Unfortunately for Justin, it happened to him, but he's overcome. He's got such a infectious, positive spirit that it was just really cool to talk to him, to understand what his struggle was, how he overcame it, and where he is today. So like a lot of these podcasts, it's another inspiring one, and just, my treat, my pleasure, and honored to speak with a guy like Justin. So as always, remember to rate and review and go into iTunes and give some love. You guys are doing a great job. The podcasts are taking off. Totally appreciate it. So know that is totally heartfelt. Okay, so on that note, let's go talk to Justin. Bye. Hey, it's Mark Pattison back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit. And today we're broadcasting live from Hermosa Beach, and we're bouncing all the way over to St. George, Utah. And I'm pretty fired up to speak to my guest today. His name is Justin Osmond because he is part of the whole Osmond clan, and he's got just a great story to tell. And so we're going to get into that in a second. But the first thing I want to do, of course, is bring in Justin. Justin, how you doing?
I'm great, Mark. Doing things. It's an honor to be on your show.
Well, hey, listen, this, as I just said in the opening, that the name of the show is called Finding Your Summit. And for me, that's all about overcoming adversity and moving on to success. And so let me just tee this up a little bit, and then you can take it from there. But, you are really a guy who's had to endure that, just not like walk the walk and talk the talk, but actually go through it, hard times. And in your case, you were born with a severe hearing loss. And I think for anybody that would be, a huge obstacle to overcome. And now you put yourself, you're the son of Merrill Osmond, one of the original Osmond brothers. I think I don't know how many, the total clan of the Osmond people that sing, but, that must have been a very difficult thing, very musical family. And now you're the kid that doesn't, you can't hear. And so what you had to do to overcome that. So what was that like for you in terms of your struggle early on?
Thanks, Mark. First of all, it's a miracle that with my profound hearing loss, that I can even hear you right now on the show, and to be able to communicate and to be able to understand what you're going through. But you're right. I was born into this world-renowned musical family, and just imagine being born into this musical family, not being able to hear anything. I wasn't diagnosed until I was almost 2 years old. So if you can just imagine, for 2 years, I lived in a world void of sound. No music, no sound. I remember vaguely going to some of my dad's concerts, and he's the lead singer of the Osmonds, and all I see is mouth moving around and no sound, no music. And to me, I thought that was normal. I thought that was just part of my life. And And then all of a sudden, they put these hearing devices in my ears, and bam, I transform into this. It was like a light switch comes on, the Christmas tree light come on, and man, we live in a very noisy world. And it was scary, but also life changing in a way, and it was difficult. I remember growing up. Technology back then is nothing like it is today. They had the big devices. I had wires coming out of my ears, and unfortunately, I got bullied and got made fun of, and because I stood out and like a sore thumb, and of course, a lot of people just didn't know how to react or respond around me just because I looked so different. But I had a wonderful family, great support, great friends. My siblings were my rock. They were always there with me, supporting me along the way. But my mom, as soon as they found out that I had a severe, profound hearing loss, they put me on a intense speech comprehension therapy program where I had to take speech therapy for almost 10 years, and just to catch up. And if you think about it, 2 years without no noise or sound or music or anything, you're almost like 2 years behind your peers. And so I had to work extra time. I had to put forth a little more mental exertion, if you will, to try to catch up. And some days I feel like I'm still trying to catch up.
No, I can appreciate. So tell me. So this stuff is innate to you because you've been living with this since day zero. And so how does that work? So you get, I'm going to hack this up. Okay. So excuse me, but just my vernacular, you get some kind of hearing aid, right? When you're 2 or 3 years old? How young were you?
Almost 2 years old. I was about 22, 23 months old. I was just outside playing with my brothers, and my mom comes out to tell us to come in for lunch. And of course, they respond, and I'm still out playing in the sandbox, and I don't respond. That's when they found out. But to answer your question, I was about 23 months.
Okay, so you're 23 months, and now, through, was there surgery, or were these just like implants, electrical devices in your ear?
Yeah, so at that time, they didn't have the newborn screening like we have today. I believe almost 100% of the hospitals out there today, when a baby is born, they go through a screening process. They can immediately find out if they have a hearing loss. But for me, they didn't know if it was a nerve deafness. They didn't know it was a bone conductive loss or a central nerve deafness. So they had to do a couple surgical procedures on me just to figure out if maybe my bones were just not in the right place in my middle ear. So they had to do a lot of different operations on me to figure out. But after a bunch of different tests, they did find out that it was a nerve deafness, which, by the way, they did some other tests, and they found out that it does run in my family. Even though I'm the only one in the whole second generation of the Osmond family that was born with this hearing loss, I did have 2 deaf uncles. In fact, it was my dad's 2 oldest brothers that were never part of the musical group, which I can tell you a little bit more about that later on. But they found out that it was hereditary. So it kind of runs in the family. So I inherited that deaf gene in my family.
So so let's talk about your family for just a second, and then I want to get back to your, all the things that you did to overcome this. And for everybody, what's about to come is this story of just great triumph with all these amazing things that you've done, Justin. So I want to get into that. But do you remember the first time that your dad, Merrill, sang? And again, this was, Jay and Jimmy and Merrill and Donnie Osmond, and they had a whole bunch of the brothers and one sister, I guess, that sang. And is there any one moment where your dad sat down, brought out his guitar, whatever he did, where that was the defining moment where music came into your ears and you heard it, and it was just that magical moment?
When you're almost 2 years old, that's like 38 years ago. And it's really hard to remember. And people have asked me that same exact question. But I can vaguely remember one time, and it was right around the time when I first heard, and I was kind of going through this huge transformation in my life. But I do remember we were at the New York Madison Square Garden in New York. My dad, my uncle, Donnie, Marie, everybody was doing a performance out there. And of course,
how old are you?
I'm just almost, I think right around 3 at this time.
Wow, and you can remember that.
Pretty young.
Wow.
That's awesome. But I remember just looking around and just the people, the fans. But I remember I was sitting in the front with my mom. They got us some good seats, but I remember looking up and it was loud. I mean, the people were louder than my dad. I mean, it was just. But I just remember hearing things, and I remember I got a headache, and it was just so loud. But I remember going backstage after, and I said, Dad, all I could see was your mouth just going up and down, and I couldn't understand one word that you said, and I just remember my dad just crying, and because he wants his own son to be able to hear his own dad sing, and not just hear him, but to understand him. So many, many years after that, my dad would always take the time and sit down with me, and he would serenade to me, just father and son. And if I didn't still get it, he would write down the words for me, the lyrics to the songs. And that was so cool, just to have that one-on-one with my dad, especially when he's the lead singer and also the producer at the Donnie and Marie show. And so he's the one that wrote many of their gold and platinum records over the years. And so yeah, that was one thing I could vaguely remember. I know that's pretty young, but it was not only frightening, but it was also enlightening, just because I can hear,
No, I can't imagine. It would be liberating. And I before my preparation for this interview with you, I went back and I've been, this has nothing to do with you necessarily, but indirectly, I was just going back and watching some of the Osmond brother videos of them singing, and not only does everybody seem, just to have that glasses half full happiness about them, that glow, but your brother in particular, your dad in particular, just seems like a good dude. He just seems like the type of guy that you'd want to hang out with, and everything is good and everything's going to be okay. And so hopefully that's what it was like for you, and it sounds like it was.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that compliment. That's very nice of you. Yes, my dad is my hero. I mean, really, he's hung out with everybody you could possibly think of. He was good friends with Elvis Presley, good friends with Paul McCartney. I mean, you name it. He's hung out with these guys, but he never let it get to his head. He's one of the most humble men you'll ever meet, and that's why I love my dad. When he's out in the spotlight, he doesn't let it get to him. He puts his family first, above everything else. He spends time with the kids, and he lets them know that too, as he create good family tradition, family time and vacations, and it create good family values as well. But more than anything, my dad and my siblings and my family always treated me like I was no different. They always told me that I could do this, and when the world tells me that I can't do this, because coming from a musical family, people think I should automatically be musically inclined, and I had doctors tell me that because of my profound hearing loss, I would never be a musician. When anybody tells me I can't do something, that ignites a fire within me like no other. And I just remember, even though I don't have the golden throat like my dad or my uncle, Donnie and Marie, and that's okay. And I'll be honest and say I cannot sing, but I can play a mean fiddle. And I wish I had my fiddle with me today. I would play for you. But interesting story. I learned.
Wait, hold on. Let's go back just a minute, okay? Because I want to get into all this. I want to make sure we don't leapfrog over something, because this is where I think the story really kicks in for you, from my perspective. In that, you're from the time that you're born to 2 years old, you can't hear anything, and that is your normal. And then you're out in the backyard and you're playing around, and now your mom calls you in for dinner, and your siblings go running in. You're still in the sandbox, and now you're in this position where they figure this thing out. They go to the doctors. You discover that there's this hearing issue. You now solve it. So now it's your new normal. Right now you can hear things, and wow, amazing. But now it's this whole thing about the other kids are that much more advanced, and so you're paddling to catch up. And so where did it kick in? Where now you're going to say, "Hey, I'm not going to let this own me. I'm going to go out and I'm going to overcome these different things." And even though I can't sing, by the way, either can I. I'm going to learn different instruments, and I'm going to go and play sports, and I'm going to go become an Eagle Scout. I mean, where did that kick in, where that determination that you're not going to let this thing, rule your life?
I've learned that you cannot let the limiting beliefs of others limit what's possible for you, what's possible for me. And I had a lot of people, unfortunately, I don't know where these people come from, but they would tell me these things. But thank goodness I had a very strong support system around me to rally me up. And trust me, I got down. I would get back off, or I would get down. But the key is to get back on the saddle. And of course, a lot of it is having a good attitude. And and it's not. What you are is who you are. I remember growing up thinking, man, I want to be like Justin Timberlake. I want to be like Justin Bieber. Like, what the heck? I don't want to be like those guys. I want to be Justin Osmond. Like right now, you can probably tell I've got a little deaf accent as we talk on the show. And, I had a really hard time with that growing up. And I had people come up to me and say, where are you from? Are you from Canada, or are you from Australia? Because you certainly don't sound like an American because of your accent. And I remember taking that so personally, so hard, that after a while I thought, you know what? That's my brand. That's who I am. That's my signature of who I am, is Justin Osmond. And so once I realized, as I tried to stop pretending to be like somebody else, like Justin Timberlake or whoever Justin is out there, and start being myself, then I realized, and I accept myself for who I am, not what I am, but who I am, then I realized that two things. I'm a lot happier with myself, and second, other people start accepting myself for who I am as well. And so I just had that transformation there, and I realized I was so much happier with myself, and that led me to my personal motto. I may have a hearing loss, but that hearing loss did not have me.
Something that you're talking about, which is really cool. So I've got a buddy who he played with me. Actually, I don't know how many people in the U.S. or in the history of playing football. He played with me at high school in Seattle. And then we played together at the University of Washington, and then we both went on into the NFL. So I don't know how many people actually pull that off. He was a quarterback. I was a receiver. His name is Hugh Millen. And one time he was with my daughter. We were all kind of in the room, and he came over to my daughter Claudette, and he goes, "Hey, Claudette," and he's got these gigantic hands, and he's got these, finger about 14 inches long, and he's got this thing in front of her, like pointing, and she's, like 4 at the time, and he goes, "Hey, Claudette, let me ask you this question: what is the one thing that you can control, that you're born with, that you have the choice to do what you want to do with? You can't change the way you look, and you can't change, if you have a disability, you can't change how athletic you are. I mean, those things are what they are, but what is that?" And she's looking at him like, not sure. And it's something that you have, which is your attitude, right? And in your case, you've got this attitude of gratitude, and you've got this, I'm not going to let this thing weigh me down. And I mean, that's just a really cool thing. It's very contagious, right? And to listen to you and to hear that these things came up. And by the way, you go back to that whole bully thing. My daughter, my younger daughter, Amelia, was born with a form of epilepsy. And so, you talked about people, giving you a bad time or bullying you or whatever that was. But for her, the same thing in high school. She just went off to Arizona and she's having a ball over there. But, it's just like, who are these people? What is the problem? I just don't get that. And it frustrates me because as a parent, I went through that with my daughter.
Yeah. Well, your daughter is very lucky to have you and have a good support system around her. And the attitude really is, everybody has particular setbacks or challenges or opposition that they go through. But the key, the secret ingredient, I believe, is not to let those challenges have you or to own you, like you said earlier. Because I believe that if anybody's ever going to do anything great in life, they have to accept the reality that there will be opposition, there will be setbacks and delays and even criticism. But when you're going to have big dreams, you're going to have big challenges, and you're going to have to face them. But the thing is, if you were an average person, then you would have average problems. But the key is that we're not average. I believe that, we all have a great destination in this life. We have great aspirations. We just need to go after it. And just being around great inspirational people like you, Mark, to help give us that hope. And that's a key word right there too, Mark, was it wasn't a lack of hearing on my part. It was more of a lack of hope that would stop me in my track, or would stop me from progressing or developing or wanting to go further. And to learn to play the violin, which I can tell you a little more about that later on. But for anybody that has a particular challenge, you just need to rise above that, rise above how the world looks at it. And deep down inside, there's a voice that says you can do this. You can absolutely do this.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. And there's no question that at times, maybe like all of us, you doubt yourself. You have that little fear monger in your head saying, can I do this? Can I not? And you may start to waver on the side of hope, but then, and that's really hopeless, but then you kind of kick it back into gear, and that's awesome. So, I see that you, because you've mentioned it, but you play the violin, the viola, the piano, the drums. I mean, what instrument don't you play? You're like a one-man band.
Man, I want to play the banjo now. My dad played the banjo, and that's one. I think that's my next instrument that I'm going to learn to play. And it's never too late as you get older. I've learned that, but yeah, I love it. And just so you know, because of my profound hearing loss, I have horrible intonation, meaning I can't hear whether it's flat or sharp or whatnot. And I remember one day, I remember like it was yesterday, I was practicing my violin one morning. All my brothers are in the other room playing their piano and their cello and whatnot. And I remember I was so frustrated because they're so loud, I can't hear myself play. And so I turned my hearing aids off. And that gets rid of one problem, which is I can't hear my siblings anymore, which is nice. I don't have to hear them. But then I decided to experiment, and I put my violin next to my chin, underneath my chin there in my neck, and I started to play. And the most amazing thing happened. As long as I stayed in the low frequency, I could hear myself play. And I soon realized, as I was talking to my teacher and some people in my music class, that it's the conductive vibration that you learn to hear, and we have to hear with our brain instead of our ears. Our ears are just an open channel for the sound wave to come through, but we really interpret all of our sound in our brain. So anyway, make a long story short, I learned to play the violin and the viola by not hearing it, but by feeling it through the vibration.
No, I can relate to what you're saying. When I was a young kid, my mother was a trained professional violinist, and she still to this day is outstanding. And she turned me on to this system called the Suzuki Method. And so essentially what that was from grade, I think kindergarten or first grade to eighth grade, I took lessons, it was all Bach, Beethoven, all that stuff. And the way we learned was not through reading music, but by listening to a record. And then then from that record, I'd translate that onto the violin. So when you're talking about, the violin is tucked under your chin and you can hear those vibrations, I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, so that makes sense to me.
That is awesome. I love hearing stories like that. That's great.
Well, we're going to start a band together. We're going to be the string section, okay?
Let's play the devil go down to Georgia. I'll be the devil, and you can be the good guy.
Yeah, man. Fortunately, I play the guitar too, so if it's something simpler, I can just jump over there. So, that's great. Okay, so now let's talk about your sports and you becoming a Eagle Scout. And I never became. I was a little nerd, Boy Scout running around. But I know to become an Eagle just takes a tremendous amount of dedication. And it seems like the guys that come out of that you just have a great. I mean, it's not because of this, but just have a great moral compass about doing the right thing and going the extra mile and achievement. And you scored that. It's awesome.
Absolutely, you bet. I credit that to my parents. They're always teaching us to be service oriented, and to become an Eagle Scout, you have to do a big Eagle Scout service project. And I just remember I had a good friend of mine. He and I were very much alike. He was also born with a profound hearing loss, but the difference was he came from a very poor, poverty-stricken family, had no money, no resources. And I just remember, man, I know what it's like not to be able to hear, and so I just remember going out and knocking on my neighbor's doors and just soliciting for $5 there, $10 there, and I was able to raise enough money as part of my Eagle Scout project to help my friend with a new set of hearing aids. And I tell you, when he came in, we were both wearing a Boy Scout uniform, and I remember handing him these hearing aids. And Mark, as he started to cry, and the change that was brought in his life, it brought a change to mine. I'm thinking, man, you know what? That is what I want to do with my life. I want to kind of pay it forward. I was bullied, and so I went out and I started an anti-bullying campaign, helping provide the gift of hearing to other kids like me all around the world. And so it's been fun to be able to participate in something like that. But yeah, it's great to be an Eagle Service Eagle Scout, and to be able to be trustworthy, loyal, hopeful, friendly, kind, obedient. I can't remember the Scout law. well, listen, it sounds like you've got some Eagle Scouts behind you pounding on the walls, so hopefully they'll lay off. We're what I can tell them, they're down in our basement. I have an unfinished basement, and they're working on our basement as we speak. I apologize.
Oh, no, not a problem at all. Okay, so part of that then, let's springboard from that. And so you're learning, how you talked about an act of service, which is so noble. And so I don't know how many years ago, but you started the Olive Osmond Foundation. What is that?
Great question. Olive Osmond Hearing Fund. That's the name of the charity. Okay. Olive Osmond is the matriarch of the Osmond family. She's my grandmother, and I am her favorite grandchild.
Didn't I see her way back when I was a kid, when they were doing the Christmas specials and all that stuff? They'd have the whole Osmond clan, and I guess it was your grandmother's house. Wasn't she? She's the person you're talking about.
Yes. So I'm sorry, Mike. Say that question one more time. What about my grandmother?
Oh, just that they used to show the whole family scene. They'd have like a Christmas Osmond special or something, and they had it over it, and they'd sing Christmas carols. And I think she was there, and Grandpa and all the siblings and whatnot. I think that's what I remember. Could be.
Yeah. Oh my God. The Osmond family Christmas special. We had so many of those, especially when they did the Donnie and Marie shows and all those television shows back in the day. But oh my goodness, those were huge family affairs where we'd all get together, and more food than you can possibly imagine on the food, on the table and whatnot. But my grandmother Olive, seriously, she was the glue to this family. She is the one that really, in fact, I'll tell you a story. It's probably an untold story of our family that not very many people know. When she had her two oldest boys, Will and Tom, they were both born deaf, like myself. And the doctors at that time told her not to have any more children because they thought that the rest of the kids would be deaf. But thank goodness she did not listen to the doctors. She had 7 more children, 9 kids total, and today the Osmond brothers, Donnie and Marie, are here. And of course, if she didn't have 7 more kids, I wouldn't be here today. But what's really neat about it? And I'll tell you the story is the whole reason why the Osmond family got started in show business was because their 2 oldest brothers, who again were both born deaf, they were never part of the musical group because they couldn't hear. And so they lived on a very small little dairy farm up in Ogden, Utah. And as you probably know, hearing aids are not cheap, and they're very expensive. And of course, they couldn't afford hearing aids for their 2 deaf brothers at the time. So what did they do? They started singing, and they started doing barbershop music, and they started performing at little functions, and little county fairs there and there. And they were able to raise enough money so they could purchase hearing aids for their 2 deaf brothers. And that right there is why, one of the main reasons how the Osmond family got started in entertainment business.
Wow, that's a great story. I didn't know that, and and beyond that, just what a great story of a family coming together and just giving of themselves for the greater good of a family member who, 2 family members who obviously needed these hearing aids.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's interesting. It runs in our family, and I'll tell you another quick story. My grandmother started this charity, and this will explain why I started the Olive Osmond Hearing Fund. At that time, my grandmother started a charity called the Osmond Foundation, and that was primarily set up to help her 2 deaf sons, to provide resources and deaf awareness and for other deaf children as well. And that charity, the Osmond Foundation, continued to grow, and it grew, and it's now known today as the Children's Miracle Network. You might have heard of the CMN hospitals or the children's hospitals, and that was actually started by my grandmother. A lot of people don't know that. She's one of the co-founders at the Children's Miracle Network. You'll see the little hot air balloon at Walmart sometimes. But anyway, so I come along, and knowing that she was so passionate about the deaf, and especially her 2 deaf sons. I mean, imagine being the brothers of Donnie and Marie and my dad, and never been able to go on stage with them. They're always behind the scene and on the side of stage, and that talk about another challenge that they had to go through. And they're a couple other of my heroes. But anyway, when my grandmother passed away, I started a charity in honor of my grandmother to carry her legacy and her dream and her passion in helping more deaf children. And so that's why I started this Olive Osmond Hearing Fund, because I love my grandmother very much, and she did so much good for people, and I just kind of wanted to continue that legacy and continue to pay that forward.
So how do you propel that today? So let's jump into all the different things that you've been able to accomplish, right? And that's growing up and playing sports, that's becoming an Eagle Scout, that's playing all these different instruments and all your schooling. Where does that take you today?
Well, I love that you're an athlete too, Mark. And again, I'm honored to be on your show and be able to even talk to you. I look up to you so much. You're a great role model for so many. Today, I remember when I played high school football, I was the field goal kicker. And just a funny little story to throw in there. I used to take my hearing aids out because it was so loud, and the fans are screaming and yelling, and I would get so distracted. But when I take my hearing aids out, it's nice and quiet, and I was able to focus and laser in on that ball. As soon as that ball was hiked, I would just go right in and I can kick that ball, and it was the nicest thing because I could never get the distraction of the screaming fan. And that applied to all my other sports, and soccer and tennis and etc. But to answer your question, kind of bring everything back into focus. Like I said, I said earlier, we cannot let the limiting beliefs of others limit what is really possible for you and I and everybody out there that's listening to this. Because deep down inside, everybody has incredible potential, despite the challenges, whether they're physically or mentally, spiritually or whatever it may be that we may be going through. I truly believe that we can climb those mountains, and when we get to the top, it's one of the best feelings in all the world. I know you know what I mean, Mark. It's just we need to surround ourselves with great people like you and people that are listening to the show, just to encourage each other, to support each other, compliment each other, instead of tearing each other down, because we do. We live in a very degenerating society. I mean, watch the news and the media.
I don't watch the news for that reason. So are you broadcasting, is your platform then, because you've got a great message, is your platform then to go out and public speak?
I'm sorry, what was the question? I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Is your platform then to public speak, to deliver this great message of optimism and support and happiness, overcoming things?
Yep, you're right. I share with the world the challenges and the blessings that come from coping with any particular challenge, and I relate that to anybody that's having the hardship that they're having to face. Talking about determination, attitude, and habits, and how to handle these challenges. So that's my platform. I just offer a message of hope to anybody that trying to tackle a particular challenge that they may be going through.
So looks like you, I don't know how recent this was, but you created a book, which I'm still trying to figure out how to actually write a book. So maybe writing is the better word than create, but called Hearing with My Heart. What is that all about?
Hearing with My Heart. Basically,
great title, by the way, Justin.
Thank you. Basically, has a lot of synonymous meaning to it, especially when I can't really hear with my physical ears, especially when my hearing aids are out. And so I've had to rely a lot on my other senses. When you lose one sense, you rely on your other senses. And so I've had to learn to follow my heart. And I know a lot of people say that. It's very easy to say. But I kind of go more into detail about that in following your instincts and trying not to be too much of an intellect, because we tend to overthink things sometimes, and that's not a bad thing. But if we're not careful, it can get us into a situation where it's not the most healthy situation we might find ourselves in. But if we really follow our heart, let the spirit of our heart guide us, our instinct, and kind of be more in unison with our intellect and our heart, combined in one, it does that. But I throw a lot of stories and experiences and stories like that in my book that talk a lot about that.
Oh, that's great. I mean, to grow up in a family like that, to have a dad, icon that has been very successful in the business for his pretty much entire life, and then for him to be a great role model, and then for you to go through the struggle and overcome a lot of these different things and write a book and play sports and become an Eagle Scout and public speak and start a foundation. I mean, you truly are, walking the walk and doing it, the way you want. And, when I started, I've done a couple things where I felt very purposeful, but I can completely relate to what you're talking about. I felt that way 5-6 years ago when I was going through a tough time, and I rediscovered really my joy by mountain climbing, and now trying to become the first NFL guy to climb the 7 summits. and getting closer to that goal. But, it's really been the journey en route to my ultimate destination that has brought me the happiness. It's not the standing on the summit, literally, but, just the whole pursuit of happiness, but doing it by, as you said, leading with your heart. And so I can really relate to what you're saying. It's great. Great message.
And I appreciate that, Mark. And I'm going to give you a free copy of my book. So let's touch base after, and I'll make sure we get you a copy of my book.
I will only accept a free copy if you sign it for me. Is that a deal? Deal or no deal?
How about you give me a signed autograph of a football in exchange for my book?
We can work something out. Maybe, we can work something out. So, last thing I want to ask you, again, you continue to do some pretty amazing stuff. And the other thing I saw was that you ran. And the reason why I say this is I can go about 5 miles and I drop. I can hike a long way, but I'm just not built to go long distances. I've done a half, but I've never done a full marathon. But you ran 250 miles in 7 days. And as I was reading about that, I just had this image of Forrest Gump, when the scene in the movie when he decides to run across the country, and, a lot of that scene was going right through Utah. So what was that about?
Oh, Mark, remind me to never do that again. So really what that was is, I apologize for the pounding downstairs.
No problem. Pound back.
But one day, and I'm not really a runner, although I just like to run a couple miles just to keep in shape. But one day I was just running, and I'm always thinking of ideas and on how I can help more deaf children here with the gift of hearing through my charity. And I remember running. I'm like, man, why not run across the whole state of Utah? And you kind of how you dream a little bit, but sometimes it's always realistic. And I came home so excited. I was on fire, and I told my wife and said, "Hen, I want to run 250 miles across the state of Utah." And I realized I did some research before then. I found out that there were 25 deaf children in the school district down in southern Utah that needed some new hearing aids. And I figured, why not raise some awareness and raise some money to help these kids? And so I did. I started a 10-month training program. And by the way, my wife didn't really support me at the time. She said, okay, we'll try for 6 months. If you're not injured by then maybe I'll go with it. Because she was just trying to protect me. But I trained. And the biggest challenge was trying to get up every morning and run another 30 miles, another 40 miles, and just going back to back. Because the challenge was I'm basically running 10 marathons back to back. And so going through all these challenges, and the thing that really made me keep going, Mark, was I would just keep thinking about those kids. And so I remember the day I started, I was doing really well. I ran 40 miles the first day. The next day I ran 35 miles. The next day I ran another 35 miles. And then by the fourth or the fifth day, I can't remember what day it was, I remember I was in such agonizing pain. I'm not even going to tell you how many toenails I lost, how many blisters I had. Almost every bone in my body was aching. And I was on my 210th mile. I had like 40 miles left. And my IT band, my runner's knee, everything was in so much pain. And I was almost ready to give up. I was on the verge of just saying, you know what? I ran over 200 miles. That's pretty dang good, And I've already raised the money to help the 25 kids. So I accomplished my goal that way. But I was just in so much pain. I didn't think I could finish. But just then, Mark, one of the most beautiful things ever happened. One of those 25 kids that I was running for, that was waiting at the finish line, drove up with his parents, and he was a little 8-year-old boy. And I remember I was on the side of the road, and he came running up to me and gave me the biggest hug. And he just started to cry. And he said, thank you so much for running for me so that I could get a new pair of hearing aids. And then I lost it, and I started crying, and there's a picture. I can send it to you sometime. But that right there, Mark, I became the Energizer Bunny. And there was some extra boost of adrenaline that came through my whole body that is so hard to explain. And the next morning, I ran all the way to the finish line, and all 25 kids there with the family and whatnot. And it was one of the hardest things I have ever done to this day, but one of the most rewarding.
You know, I love that story. And I mean, look, I have, between NFL camps and other physical challenges I've done up in the mountains, this last May, you know, I was on a crazy mountain. The weather is actually worse than it gets on Mount Everest, a mountain called Denali. And we were up at 14,000 feet every day, and it was minus 25 in our tent every night. I mean, think about trying to sleep in that. And, you know, I mean, you've got as many layers as you can put on. And, I mean, night after night, and you're sleeping on the snow. And, you know, I mean, it's hard. And what I kept saying to these other people is like, look, pain is temporary. And this all becomes about a mindset of just that, of like, you will get through it, but you just got to go through the pain and just get to the other side. And in this case, you did exactly that. And you needed some kind of little booster, you know, like the story of this kid that jumped out of the car. He's 8 years old. He comes over, gives you a big hug, and he appreciated, you know, exactly what you did. But we all need those little, you know, inspirations. And whether somebody else, a coach, chews you out, or whether a little kid runs up to you, or whether you listen to something, or whatever that is, we can all get to the other side. And whatever you're going through, it's temporary. So I mean, it's just, I loved hearing that story, and I would love to see that photo that you're talking about. That would just be an amazing photo to see. So, well, listen, Justin, you have been a great guest on this show. Again, so many people out there, everybody actually goes through something, and some people's struggle is worse than others. And certainly you've had your adversity to get through, and you've done that, and you've done that fighting. You've done that in a very triumphant way, and you've done it with the most positive attitude. And I just really congratulate you for that. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Mark, thank you. It was an honor to be on the show, and thank you for all you're doing, and inspiring so many people, and appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, and one last thing, where can people find you? Because you have a great message, and people need to hear it.
Thank you. They can go to JustinOsmond.com.
JustinOsmond.com. Okay, well, we're also going to put that in the show notes. So on that note, you can go down and tell the worker bees to, you know, take a break, and obviously working away. So they're getting paid, and, you know, they're doing what they should be doing. Okay. All right, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, this is Mark, and thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast this week. We had another great guest, and it is so awesome to continually have these different people on, talk about their different adversity, how they've overcome that, and what they've done to affect change in their life to become very successful. So, you know, really appreciate you guys tuning in. So, as always, we love the rating and reviews that you guys do on iTunes. If you haven't done that, please go do that. It really helps us in terms of increasing our visibility within Apple iTunes. And anyways, it's just fun to share the love and what these different stories, these different people are all about. So make sure you tune in next week. We appreciate it. And that's it. Bye.